And now, a message from New York State Attorney General Letitia James.
Hi, I'm Letitia James, New York Attorney General, and I want to make sure New Yorkers and all Americans get to vote in a free and fair election, which is why I'm sending a message to Donald J. Trump. And that message is, I'm coming for you. That's right. You tried to mess with all of us, not just New Yorkers, and I cannot with you right now. All right? Win, lose, or draw your ass across the pavement. I won't hurt you physically because that's illegal, and I'm a lawyer and I get it, but I will sue your broke ass into oblivion. So in summation, Donald, lawyer up. But like a good lawyer, not like Rudy Giuliani, because we can all admit he's the worst, right? And he has a sweating problem. Someone should talk to him about that. See you in court.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Electoral Dysfunction, the show where comedians and experts debate the news of the week from the safety of their quarantine. I'm your host, Tom Brennan, and as we sat down to record today, the news broke. Joe Biden will be the 46th president of these United States. I want to say a quick thank you to our friend Keisha Zoller for our opening bit. With that, we're going to throw it right over to the hardest working journalist in the business. She's been like our own Kornacki at the big board. Amanda Nicastro. Amanda, you're on the ground outside New York where celebrations are underway. Amanda, anyone listening, she appears to be drinking a lot of alcohol and dancing. But Amanda. So Amanda, what's the mood like out there?
Tom. The mood is, yeah! Fuck yeah! Don't let the door in the ass on the way out, Trump! Fuck yeah!
All right. Well, that's the scene here in New York City on the news that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will be taking over the White House in January.
Tom! I know we got a lot of work to do, but you need to get out here, okay? It's time to celebrate, okay? We're celebrating today. And tomorrow we go back to work. But today, Tom, come on, get out of that office. Come celebrate.
We'll do that as soon as the panel's done. With that, Ned Thorne, star white me to this week's panel. And join me in welcoming our panel. And what a day. What an incredible day for this. Really excited to have all these people here. First up, she's a brilliant lawyer. Follow her on Twitter at Audrey Laudamercy. That's AudreyLawdAmercy. Got it right. Madiba Denny. Hey, Madiba, how are you?
Doing excellently, Tom. Happy to be here.
Oh, boy, it's a good one. Our Electoral Dysfunction's other legal counsel / magician / cartoonist, Scott Benjamin's here. Hey, Scott, how are you?
Hey. Better than yesterday, and glad to be here.
We're glad to have you as well. And by the way, we'll drop this in the comments, but check out Scott's wonderful little comic strip he and his wife did, Quarantine Comics. They are charming and enjoyable at every turn. Also with us, she is the host of DTF, the Daryl and Timmery Fun Hour. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts. And also you can check out her show, Get You a Babe Who Could Do Both, which is combines lightning talks with burlesque, because they're going to be doing a virtual show on November 13th. Dr. Timmery Schmidt. Hey, Timmery, how are you?
I'm in Philly, so everything is pretty fucking awesome.
Everything's a little extra and great in Philly right now.
You're going to be hearing a lot of happiness and joy coming in through my window. You're welcome, America.
Thank you. Nothing I love more than all these nerds the last year, like these MAGA nerds, like lawyers are like, we're going to Philly. This is war. Where I'm like, don't do that. Even the most conservative racist in Philly is going to take one look at your smug face and be like, get the fuck out of here. Like, that is not a town to go to war with. And of course, I'm sorry, I keep saying this. Opinion columnist for Bloomberg Opinion, Robert George. Robert, my friend, how are you today?
I am 2 Mike's Hard Lemonades, doing well, Tom. It's a great day for America, and it's a great day for the West Indies. You know, I'm repping my Trini flag here because I have to say something nice about Jamaica because a daughter of a Jamaican immigrant and a daughter of Indian immigrant is the vice president-elect. So, you know, cheers to Kamala Harris, and cheers to America, because an immigrant myself, you know, I love this country, and I would still love this country even if Donald Trump had been reelected. But I actually do love it even more right now.
Fair enough. That is, and let's get to that. And before we get to the obvious news that broke just before we started recording, I'm going to do a quick history lesson, like a dumb Rachel Maddow, like the dumb version of Rachel Maddow is who I am. I'm going to take us back in time to July 2015, when then presidential candidate Donald John Trump at an event was asked about criticism that he took from then Senator John McCain. He said, "I like war heroes who don't get captured." And later that week, on Electoral Dysfunction, on stage at our old haunting grounds, the People's Improv Theater, Robert George
Tom,
said,
Tom, later that day.
No, don't correct me. I'm sorry. Biden won. I'm not getting pushed around by Republicans anymore. A few days later, or maybe later that day, timeline's fuzzy, on stage, Robert George said that was the beginning of the end of the Donald Trump campaign. Robert, it took 5 years and some months, but finally it's come true. Today, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have been declared the winners of the 2020 presidential election, Pennsylvania putting them over the top. The final tally on electoral votes still to come. Some networks have called Arizona for President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris. Some have not, but it's looking like Arizona and Nevada trending in Biden's direction as well. North Carolina looking to be trending, and Alaska is still out, both trending in Trump's direction. Georgia looking to be trending in Biden's direction, though it is close enough that there will be a statewide mandated recount. But regardless, when we left our live show on election night, the mood was not nearly as happy as it is right now. What a difference a few days makes. Let's start with the emotion. There's so much to unpack here, but how's everyone doing? Like, we'll go around. A lot of arms in the air. We'll start with Diva. How do you feel today? What's the feeling? You're in Brooklyn, I believe, correct?
I'm in Brooklyn, yeah. And I found out that Biden won because all of a sudden I just heard cheering and like car horns honking. And like as soon as that started, I was like, oh my God. And so I checked my phone and I just Googled election, because my standard was going to be, when can I just Google election and see Biden like wins? Like that's how I know it's official, when AP has the front page of just Googling it. And there it was. And I screamed. The like bottle of Prosecco that I've had sitting in the fridge, like conditionally, like my partner and I were free to open it now. We like opened the window and we're cheering outside at people. It almost felt like, when in the like Dickens story when he's like, child, like what day is it? Like yelling out the window. Like, that's what it was basically like. It was incredible. We then went outside where there was like a spontaneous dance party. Just like a group of strangers all across the neighborhood, literally dancing in the street together. It was incredible.
Outstanding. Timmery, you were in Philadelphia. You are in Philadelphia. You were present for a few days of activism as counter protesters and some attempted troublemakers showed up to try and intimidate the vote, which again, hilarious. And Philadelphia, I say this many a time and it's still true. No one knows how to protest, celebrate, demonstrate, what have you, quite like Philadelphians. And they turned out. What is it like on the streets of, in my view, sorry, New York, my home, the greatest city in the world?
It was phenomenal. Like immediately there was just screaming. It was the closest thing that has ever happened in the last several years is like when they won the Super Bowl. That is the only other time it has been like this. And I'm just ecstatic with my city right now. I went down by the convention center the other day to like see the people, and it was hopeful. And to be honest, like this is the most excited people have been in a while, and just in general, we've had so many reasons to be so sad. And there was like this little corral of like the MAGA guys showing up, and I, without even thinking this consciously, just said aloud, dorks, because they were just like so outnumbered and so dweeby in comparison. And on the other side of all the count the vote votes, there's like all sorts of different types of people, all ages, like all ethnicities, everybody's in this good mood. There's a DJ set up, we're having a good time. And over on the MAGA side, it's just like, I want to give you guys wedgies. You are just dweebs. And yeah, I mean, I love how people thought they were going to come bring a fight to Philly. Like, that's not a fucking compliment. Like, you didn't just hit on us. Like, whatever, guys.
Did the cha-cha slide in response to them. It was amazing.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Scott, I'm gonna ask you, and we don't, normally on this show, because I am biased against life, I guess. We don't normally have a lot of parents on the show, but I'm curious, as you're both a father and a grandfather. I'm curious, what is it like to be in this moment with that role, with that thought? What are you feeling with that right now?
If you hadn't framed the question that way, that was going to be my answer anyway.
Hey, all right.
So I have a granddaughter who was born in the summer of 2016. And the election comes in the fall of 2016, and it goes terribly. And all of my family wrote sort of comments out to the world that, sorry, we couldn't give you a better deal. Sorry, it worked out this way, we tried. And so Donald Trump is the only president she's ever known for 4 years. And she's a really smart little kid. And I guess it's a week ago now, on Halloween, she loves telling stories and writing stories and illustrating stories. She wanted to write some scary stories for Halloween. And she wrote a story where Donald Trump was the monster character, and she illustrated it. And I pulled it up on my phone. I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but that is her illustration of Donald Trump. And I want you to notice the color choices. He's orange with a giant tuft of yellow hair.
And he's been brought to his knees.
Yes. So I feel like the villagers gathered around with the torches and got rid of her monster.
You did it. You brought her story true.
Yeah.
That's what democracy looks like.
Oh, man.
Democracy looks like.
Well, that's so good to hear. If I had known that a week ago, I'd have voted even harder, just to win. Finally, Robert George, your initial takes, particularly, you are someone who is, you've traveled quite a journey over the Trump presidency. Despite being a Republican, Donald Trump blocked you on Twitter before he even ran for office. You've been never Trump since before that was a thing. What do you, initial feelings and thoughts here on a day that I think it's fair to say, like, I'm not surprised that he hasn't conceded, but there was part of me that's like, man, evil and rich people always seem to win in this country. I almost couldn't envision him losing, even though the trends were in that direction. So what are your thoughts?
Partial, I can't even call it exhilaration at this moment. It's partial relief in the short term, because as I've said over the course of several weeks, well, basically since the pandemic's been going on and the election was moving forward, I'm like pessimistic for the next seven to 10 years of the country. And I said that a while ago, that regardless of who wins, I think the country is in for a rocky period. And I was thinking that that rocky period will be minimized slightly if Biden wins, because I think we may have a few months or so to try and get a couple of things done. But in the short term, as I said, I'm happy. Getting rid of Donald Trump in the White House was necessary for what has to happen positively to America in the coming years and decades. But it's not sufficient. Getting him out of the White House is not going to heal the really deep and serious divisions that exist right now. And it's not like we always say, oh, we're a divided country. You know, I mean, it's not like, oh well, the corporate tax should be 25%. No, it should be 40. You know,
That'll resolve it.
that's not the type of divisions. Those are the divisions we've had in the past. Those are not the divisions that we're going through right now. Joe Biden will end up with the most votes of any president elected. 76 million people. And Donald Trump will end up with the second most votes of any presidential candidate. He'll end up with more votes. He'll end up with more votes than Barack Obama in 2008. And we've had this conversation before. I'm not one of those people who believes that those nearly 70 million people are all racist, but there is a major cultural divide that this country has not undergone since the 1860s, and there's healing that divide. Well, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. So sorry to bring everybody down, but
I think that's a fair point, and that actually, well done. You've seamlessly transitioned to my next part, the current division that we have, which is to say, as of right now, the president, who as of now is still Donald John Trump for now, has not conceded and will not concede the election. The night of the election, he gave a speech that most people, even people on the right, not just the left, everyone's sort of gut reaction to this speech that he gave at 2 a.m. was horror. Chris Christie and Rick Santorum were horrified, which is bananas to me. If you're a Republican saying something that Rick Santorum's scared of, I'm like, oh shit, he's about to Thanos us out of existence. It's over. And even now, like, it seems like his rhetoric has calmed a bit from that, but it is still not one of concession. It is, he this morning said he won, and that, the results aren't called. They're going to fight this in court, fight every ballot. He tweeted from the golf course, where I think they should just lock the doors of the golf course. And honestly, as a taxpayer, I'd be fine if it's like the trade-off to get him out of there is we fully fund that golf course for the rest of the time. Sure, fine, cool. If it means he doesn't come back, all right, I'll deal with it. But his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani,
just say those words again.
A man who,
in my veins, Tom. Rudy Giuliani, Donald Trump's lawyer, into my veins.
Look, I can never say this enough. A man who my parents used to have to pay so that he could live in a mansion. Is Rudy Giuliani. Has been on the ground in Philadelphia and other cities around the disputed states, demanding that he asked if people thought they were all stupid or fools for watching the vote counts change, to which yep. What I guess I'm curious at this point, certainly the president can sow some ill will and undermine, through his powers of just questioning the election, undermine some credibility of the election with at least his base. But legally, is there much room that the president has to do anything at this point?
Answer.
Go ahead, Tim.
He has every right to call for a recount, right? Like if there's a certain margin, sure, great, fine. Let's do it again. I'll gladly do this again. I'll do it again and again. We can have this exact same party a week from now. I would love it over and over again to let him know how many people don't like him. I'm glad to do it over and over. Sure, great.
That is a thing I thought when I was like, when a few days passed, like, yeah, I'm tired of waiting, but it's kind of great that every single day Donald Trump is watching his votes fall a little bit further. But Scott, thoughts on that?
Well, so my thought is anybody can bring any kind of lawsuit to the doorway of a courthouse. But you need more to get past the doorway. And so far, he really hasn't done that. And I seems like the types of lawsuits that he's bringing, you can write a legal paper, and the fundamental question initially is, do these allegations, if true, authorize the relief that you're seeking? So if I go into a courthouse with a piece of paper that says the president planted a chip in my brain while I was sleeping and he's been stealing all my dreams, if that was true, that would be a problem, and I would probably be entitled to some type of compensation.
I'd say so.
But a case like that would probably get dispensed with pretty quickly.
Yeah, and actually that case was dispensed with when my father tried to take Gerald Ford to court over a chip in his brain, but it didn't work.
The
Ahead,
chips were much less sophisticated in the 1970s.
Yeah, it was very big.
But what I think ultimately is that I think that Donald Trump is a person who is not capable of forming sincere beliefs. I just think he says stuff because it's useful to him or he perceives it to be useful. I have no idea whether he actually believes that the election is being stolen from him or he thinks it's just a useful thing to say right now. But it strikes me that back in 2015 and 2016, people around him are reported to have said that he was describing this election as something he never expected to win, but it was the world's greatest infomercial. And I feel like this whole move right now is part of his branding exercise for phase 3 or phase 4 of Donald Trump, where he's going to start some kind of network that's going to be based entirely on conspiracy theories and grievance. And if you want to successfully start that, you don't go out on a concession. You go out kicking and screaming and saying, look, they're stealing this from me. Tune in tomorrow and watch the Grievance Network. So that's what it seems to be about.
I think that's a pretty correct assessment. Like, Donald Trump needs to remain the hero in his own mind. And so if that means he's been like victimized here and like will now go on to like fight in another way, like that's the story he'll tell himself and the story he'll tell his base. Backtracking a little bit to what Scott was mentioning about the actual legal process if these like votes were to be challenged. There's a law professor, Justin Levitt, who had a great line the other day upon reviewing some of the filings challenging to like stop the counting in Pennsylvania and stuff. And Justin was like, this is just a tweet with a filing fee. Like there's nothing, there's nothing in here that, as Scott was saying, it's like a cognizable claim. Like there's nothing actually in here like that's, if proven, would be like an unlawful activity. They have like no actual proof of the claims they're making. Now, if they were to try go about this, I'm almost like hesitant to say it because I don't want to like give Republicans ideas. But if they were to try to go about this, they would challenge to that like all of the votes that came in like after Election Day or something should not be counted, and just sort of like subtract from the vote count these votes that have like already been tallied, which like is nonsense. Like every legal vote should be counted, and especially considering that we're in a pandemic, so people had to rely on like mailing in ballots if they wanted to exercise their votes safely. We should definitely be thinking about, okay, when did these people actually postmark their ballots and things. But so like that would be their one sort of wiggle room, like trying to carve something out. And like there is, I think there is like some openness to that on the courts, because I think earlier today there was a ruling where they didn't stop the counting in Pennsylvania, obviously, but I think Alito was like, but if they wanted to set all of the votes that came in after like 5 o'clock on November 3rd in like a separate pile, like they can do that, but they still have to count all of them, which in my head, I'm like, oh, they're trying to have a separate section of these so they can be like, there was something wrong with those votes, we now get to subtract them. So if they were to get up to some shenanigans, I think that's the genre the shenanigans would be in, but I do think it's like not really legally legitimate, and there are also plenty of like attorneys like mobilizing to protect the numbers, and forget attorneys, they're like regular people in the streets mobilizing to protect the numbers because they exercised their choice. Like they voted for Donald Trump to get his ass out of the White House, and that's what's going to happen.
Let's talk a little bit about that, specifically in terms of Pennsylvania, why the vote took so long and why it took so long. And Timmerie being from there and Robert being in the news business, correct me when I'm wrong in a minute, because it's going to happen. But basically, as I understand it, Pennsylvania, the governor of Pennsylvania, while anticipating that there would be a huge influx of mail-in votes, who is a Democrat, went to the Republican-controlled state legislature and asked them to change their rules, because their rules currently had that you couldn't open mail-in ballots until Election Day, and I think in even some parts of the state until the day after Election Day. And the Republicans said no for, let's assume, let's be generous and say just bad reasons and not full-on corrupt reasons. But the thought, like as some people in the media are arguing, and I would argue it too, that the idea being that like this way Pennsylvania comes in late, and that's time for us to really, that could give Trump time to declare victory while the wait was going on, unaware that there'd be more than one state that we would be waiting on a few days, as it turned out. Is that more or less like an accurate assessment of what happened there?
As I understand it, that's definitely what happened with Pennsylvania. But I think that's also basically what that happened with Wisconsin and Michigan as well.
Yeah.
In all of those states, you have a Democratic governor and a Republican legislature. And the Republican legislatures all decided that if they were going to have mass mail-in ballots, the rule would be that you would not start counting those until election day at the earliest. Now, contrast that with Florida, which has both a Republican governor and a Republican legislature, but because of the 2000 meltdown, they've cleaned up their systems. They've gotten very comfortable with. They're not exclusively mail-in ballots, but the electorate there is very comfortable with mail-in ballots, and they start counting their mail-in ballots either a week or maybe as much as 2 weeks before election day. So when election day comes around, the only ones that they have to count are the day of. And so Florida, we may not like the outcome there, but praise to them, they got everything. They got 90%, 95% of everything counted on election day because they started on the mail-in ballots early. And Donald Trump may have wanted to send the signal to Republicans, don't count the mail-ins until late, because the day of vote is going to allow me to declare victory. But it ended up just making what was going to be a foreordained conclusion far more humiliating for him, and he didn't even get the the rhetorical political boost that he thought he might get out of it.
Yeah, I mean, the only argument I've ever heard for why you shouldn't start counting when they're coming in or at some point earlier, that kind of thing in Pennsylvania, I saw someone on Twitter, their argument was if they start counting them early, then those numbers will leak and it will affect voting. And I still was like, okay, go on. Like, you have given me part of an argument, but tell me how that ... finishes out. So like, let's say this information somehow leaks, which is the whole thing in and of itself. But so then what? Like, is the idea that somehow I will be galvanized to vote again? Like, how is that going to change the basic way that we do this, which is that like some people vote and some people don't? Is there this portion of the population that is super concerned with the outcome but wasn't going to vote before and now suddenly will? Like, I don't know, maybe.
I will say this, and a point of personal privilege here, because I'm going to take you guys back to my college years, where, and this is going to sound ridiculously goofy, but it is going to make sense by the time I get to the end. I ran for student polity president when I was at St. John's College, and the person I was running against, this guy named Thomas. He was best friends with the polity, like the version of the college version of the Supreme Court justice, right? It's like the polity judge. We had a polity court. Anyway,
I think most people are just called like seniors who didn't graduate, right?
well,
Something
getting close to that. Anyway, so I'm running against this guy, and the polity court is the one that tabulates ballots. Word gets out that the head of the court whispers in the ear to my opponent that he's down X votes, right? And he said, "You better get your act together." Word gets back to me that this is going on, and I cry foul. And there was a third candidate in the race too. And I said, "I'm sorry, this is just ridiculous, outrageous." So there was this like kerfuffle for a few weeks as to like, what are we going to do? What do we do? And they ended up throwing out the election and having a recount, having a new election like 2 or 3 weeks later. Of course, it was the third party candidate that ended up winning. It's like, which is classic college politics.
Right.
So so I say that only just to respond respectfully to Tim Marie, that you don't want word leaking. You don't want word leaking out ahead of time, because it can actually allow for certain hijinks and try and force people out to the polls that they may not want to go and stuff.
I understand that on the face.
But that doesn't happen. But as I said, you've got a great example in Florida. That doesn't happen. They start the count. But it's always kept in house. And just because you've got the machines rolling and so forth and actually counting, it doesn't mean that everybody in the building has access to those numbers. The amount of people who do have so my point is, you're absolutely correct that the argument is completely bogus. But I'm just saying that there is a reason. There's a reason why you wouldn't want the information to leak out, even though it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, I wondered if, like, okay, so let's just say 2016. I think a lot of people felt like it was going to go differently than it did, and maybe didn't vote because of it.
Yeah.
I assume that there's a portion of the population who are like, it's fine. I don't, I'm not personally motivated to vote in this.
And she's got it in the bag. She's got it in the bag. Yeah. I don't need to go out there.
Right. So there's definitely.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, a thought that I just immediately have is like, given each state runs its election differently, a thing I thought about this late into Tuesday night, early Wednesday morning, as numbers started to change in Arizona and Nevada. This is like, how many people were in line in Arizona or Nevada and were like, maybe I don't want to stay in line. Or they looked at their phone and saw Ohio and Florida go red, and they're like, nope, staying in line. I will stay in line until this is over. Scott, go ahead.
I was going to say one more thing just about the Pennsylvania rule, because there's a rule in Florida that they can count certain votes ahead of election day. There's a rule in Pennsylvania that you can't. And I think I'm going to try to generously ascribe good motives to Alito, which I do with great reluctance, and good motives to the Republican, I guess, governor or whoever it was who decided not to change the rule. And I think the issue is, again, a legal one, partly, that as a lawyer, you want your client to have had some rights violated, because then you have something to complain about. If everything was clean, then you've got nothing to go to court and complain about. And so if they change the election rule, mid-election, somebody's going to complain, hey, they changed the rule mid-election. They may change the rule before 2024, but if that was the rule in place and somebody changed the rule mid-election, then somebody can go to court and complain about that.
But that was a separate rule. That was a separate rule, though, wasn't it, Scott? And that was the fight over whether ballots that come in, I think between 3 and 4 days after the election day, even if they are postmarked on election day or before election day, whether those that come in 3 or 4 days afterwards should be counted. Initially, the law says the ballots have to arrive by election day. Then the Pennsylvania Supreme Court said, because of the pandemic, we're allowing a 3 or 4 day window for pre or on election day postmarked ballots. And Alito basically says, oh, okay, you're going to just put those aside. You're going to segregate those that come in afterwards, and then we can make an assessment afterwards whether they should be counted. From what I understand, there's not even enough that will make a difference either way. But this is the thing; they were already doing that. I mean, Pennsylvania was already doing that. So I think Alito was trying to like give a little morsel to the Republicans there.
You know, Rob, as you were talking about the sort of marginal difference it would make, if any, that makes me think more that how they're going to have, even they being the Republicans, are going to have even less of an avenue to challenge this. Like, they might have thought, okay, we can have a shot at getting like some ballots thrown out. But are they really going to succeed at getting like the millions thrown out that they would need to overcome the hurdle of them just getting completely stomped? Like, it's unlikely.
Well, no. The crazy thing you saw in that period between Election Day and Saturday is that in some parts of the country, Trump and Republicans were yelling, count the votes, Arizona, and then in the other part of the country, stop the count. I mean, I mean, it's just it's absurd. I mean,
the point it goes to is that Trump and his ilk, their real concern is not whether ballots are valid or legitimate. It's whether they find the voter valid or legitimate. Like, their problem is not actually with the possibility of mail fraud. It's about the person exercising their right to vote.
Sorry, go ahead, Jimmy.
I'm just curious if now we can finally get rid of the Electoral College, right? Like, I have been wondering this whole time what the point of it was. Any purpose it would have had on any level, philosophically, assuming best intentions of it, would have prevented Trump from being president in 2016. And it didn't end up doing that. And now I think we can all agree that it's stupid and we shouldn't have spent several days waiting to find out if the guy who already had millions more votes was the victor.
I want to add, before you go to Robert, I'd add, in addition to that, is that there's now a plausible argument for the Republican Party to support abolishing the Electoral College as well, just to say forever, at least in my modern political consciousness, but pretty much forever, if you're a Republican and you want to win the presidential election, you need to win 2 states, Florida and Ohio. Donald Trump won Florida and he won Ohio, and he lost still. And I think, I don't expect the Republican Party to get on board with abolishing the Electoral College. Also, and we can talk a little bit more about this given the makeup of Congress after this election, I don't expect that you would need, I believe, a constitutional amendment to get rid of the Electoral College, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't think it'll practically happen. But were I in the Biden administration and I were pushing the Electoral College, getting rid of the Electoral College, I'd also come from a standpoint of look at how many states your guy won and he still lost. Come on.
This gets a little bit wonky here, but have you guys been following the interstate popular vote compact?
No.
I have.
Of course, Robert has.
There you go.
I just email Robert when I need to know things. So,
so it's a pretty nifty trick, and it would work. The idea is this: a bunch of states have already signed on, including New York, and it's a matter of law in New York. New York has legislated this, and the idea is that once enough states sign on to the compact to total 270 electoral votes, that's when it goes into effect. And each of those states who sign on agree to assign all of their electors to the candidate who won the national popular vote, which means the candidate who wins the national popular vote automatically has at least 270 electoral votes. So he wins, and you don't need a constitutional amendment. And there are enough states signed on now that I think are close to 200 electoral votes, maybe 190 something, and they have to reach 270 to actually implement it.
not surprisingly, I believe all or maybe all but one of those of those that have signed on to it are blue states. And there might be like a purple state or two that are in there, but they tend to be they tend to be slightly more blue purple than they are red purple. Yeah, did I say that right? Yeah. So I don't see that. I don't really see that happening anytime soon. As Tom said, when Republicans start seeing once reliably red states starting to slip out of that column and moving into the purple area, like say Georgia, they might start getting around to the idea of adopting the popular vote. Because let's be clear here, and we touched upon this a little bit earlier. I guess I touched upon this a little bit earlier. None of us on this panel like Donald Trump. None of us support him. None of us have voted.
Well, I like him, but I just don't like him as a president.
Yeah. And you don't even really like him as a
To clarify, no, I do not like him at all. And in fact, I will quickly dovetail to the fact that well before Donald Trump was a politician, I was raised by a man who, when we were little kids, my sister and I, we'd drive down to my grandparents in Cape May, New Jersey. We'd go past Newark Airport on the turnpike, and my dad would gleefully point to Donald Trump's private plane that could not fly because he was bankrupt and couldn't afford to fill it up with gas. So I've hated Donald Trump well before America even knew he was a monster. So
You're a hipster.
That's
excellent.
right. Me and my
Excellent.
dad.
You were an early adopter. The point I was gonna make was no, it's fine. I'm actually always happy to hear Thomas Brennan Sr. Stories because they're very funny.
Yeah.
But the point is, he got more popular votes than any presidential nominee other than Joe Biden. He is he's a very rare person, presidential nominee, who got not more votes, a whole boatload of more votes than he got the first time, and then ended up losing. Which, I mean, we can say that's karma and so forth, but I say that because it took a Herculean effort for Democrats and never Trump type Republicans and independents and so forth to defeat Donald Trump popularly and in the Electoral College. But it's not out of the question that, knock wood, if he's still got his faculties still about him 4 years ago, he may take another run at the White House, and he will be the same age as Joe Biden is now, and he could. It's not out. I would not see him losing any of his base before then. So it's not out of the question that he could. So the idea that Republicans have gotten into their heads that we'll lose we don't care about the popular vote. We'll just go with the Electoral College. Republicans can win the popular vote, and they eventually will again. I mean, they've lost it 7 out of the last 8 times, but it's not out. It's not completely and totally out of their not completely totally out of their grasp. Yeah, they're going to have to figure out. They're going to have to. California is more of a problem for them than say even New York is. But again, if they've got a base of Florida, Ohio, and still Texas, that's a hell of a lot. That's a hell of a lot of people in those states, and they could still do it.
And I want to transition. Sorry, Madiba, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the possibility of Republicans winning the popular vote. I don't know if I share your confidence, Rob, or at least I think if the Republicans were to win the popular vote, one of two things would need to happen. They would either need to dramatically change as a party so that they attract voters, or they would have to engage in like even more voter suppression. Like they can win the popular vote if they stop people from voting. Like that's the only way I can really see it happening, but I can't imagine.
Legal votes is the new phrase. That's right. Legal votes.
Right, yeah. But I can't imagine the Republican Party as is winning the popular vote. Although I will say, I have been wrong before about like how many votes Donald Trump would get. I was mistakenly under the impression that he had hit his ceiling in 2016. Like I was expecting he wasn't going to get more than like 63 million votes. And so I was shocked, and I guess I'm struggling to think of the words to really describe how I was feeling, that somehow after 4 years of all this, and after like a pandemic that he's presided over and let hundreds of thousands of people die due to his incompetencies, that somehow millions more people would look at that and say, actually, yes, sign me up for some more of that. I didn't see that coming.
Mm-hmm.
So I will express that, you know, I could be wrong, but I would be very surprised.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, he can't.
point,
I mean, you said it. I mean, at this current time, nearly 250,000 more people are dead that weren't dead that were alive 4 years ago, and even that he's managed to add 7 or 8 million people in support of him. So there is something of I'll say it politely, there's something of a blindness to his faults. And I say that, by the way, and I tweeted this out earlier, I have very good friends, I mean long time friends, who are Trump voters. You know, many of them who live in New York. And no, I don't think of them as either racist or nativist or whatever, but they voted for Trump either because of his virtues, or excuse me, despite his vices, and possibly because of his virtues, or alternately because they felt that the forces behind Joe Biden, whether you want to call it the woke left or whatever you want to call it, is more problematic than the many vices of Donald Trump. So that's that.
I haven't encountered that. Like the people that I know that support him, the ones that I know personally anyway, and it's usually like friends' parents or something. They're not like people that are close to me. They don't like him, and it's not a vote for him. They literally are just like, this guy will tax me at a rate I don't like because my partner and I both make $200,000, and it has absolutely nothing to do with him. And the fact that they can overlook his racism and overlook his misogyny says that at least it's not a deal breaker. So even if it's not a part of their identity, they're like, I'm a racist, they still are, because it's not a problem. It's not a disqualifying feature.
Well, hang on. I want to reset, just like, and we'll get to what you're going to say, but this is important because it kind of resets what I want to talk about next, which is, Joe Biden is the president. Democrats lost seats in the House. They had probably their best shot at taking in the Senate in many years. And so far, barring, Georgia, we have 2 Georgia runoffs in January, and which will determine the makeup of the chamber. If Democrats win both, then Democrats will have a majority with a split Senate and Kamala Harris as the tie-breaking vote. But regardless, down ballot, Democrats didn't do as well as they did at the top of the ballot. And part of that is, Trump voters showed up in 2020. They didn't show up in 2018. I went back and looked at some of the numbers, and some of these House races where Democrats lost seats, the Democrats running increased their numbers over 2018. They got more votes than they got in 2018, but their opponents got even more. And it's the same thing when you look at the polling in seats like the Iowa Senate seat and the Montana Senate seat, were seats where Democrats thought they had a fighting chance to win. And it looks like the difference is Trump voters who showed up to vote for Donald Trump who said, and yeah, I'll vote for whoever the Republican is. It's sort of a mirror. It's like a bizarro version of the Obama voters who would show up when he was on the top of the ticket, but not when he wasn't. And I think that comes the idea that, like, you know, what we're talking about here is that, you know, there's a conversation that has to be had in the Democratic Party, which is reckoning the fact that even though Trump won't be on the ballot anymore, you know, they have to rethink how they approach voters in a post-Trump world. Republicans do as well. It is not lost on me that I think Mitt Romney is the most prominent Republican to congratulate Joe Biden on his win at this point. So far, the party has held back. Even George W. Bush, who I suspect once he congratulates Biden on the win, that means that the dam's broken and everyone can congratulate him. Even he hasn't said anything yet as of this recording. By the time this goes live, that might change. You know, Mitch McConnell is being this, like, count every vote, let's hold up, but he's also not explicitly awarding the win. And that is because they want to keep those Trump voters in the fold. Because exactly as you said, like, if Republicans are to win the popular vote in an election in the future, at least in the next few years, they're going to need those Trump voters. And I think it is fair to say, you know, to Robert's point, like, we learned this election that a lot of people vote for Trump for a variety of reasons. And I mean, both of what Robert and Tim were saying is true. Like, you know, like in Robert's case, like, the racism and the hatred and, like, those policies aren't their thing, but the judges are, or the taxes are, or whatever. It's like, you know, there's a fair counter argument, I think, to be made that if you are tolerant of that hatred, then you are on some level complicit. But as we saw, he won Cuban voters in Florida by big numbers. He increased his votes with Black Americans, not to a huge number, certainly, but more than previous Republicans. And that the reasons for that have to be noted.
Or I should say, just to be accurate, Tom, equal to previous Republicans. He got
So, yeah.
If, and this is a big if, exit polls are to be trusted, and given the unusual aspect of this election, you don't always have to. But the numbers that I think it's Edison's study, which New York Times seems to have adopted as well, was that he got about 12% of the Black vote, which is, yes, it's more than he got in 2016, and it's more than either Mitt Romney or John McCain got, because they were actually running against, a Black nominee. But it was basically kind of in line with what Republican presidential nominees have gotten from African Americans from, say, 1976 to 2004, somewhere in that 10 to 13% range. So it's not necessarily anything to write home about, except for the fact you're saying, well,
didn't go down.
If Donald Trump is the most racist nominee or most racist president since, I don't know, Woodrow Wilson, or whoever you want to go with.
All but one.
How did he manage to do that? And it kind of this is kind of to circle back to what Tim Marie was saying. While it's true, you've got people who are saying, well, I've got a $200,000 or $300,000 job, and I don't want my taxes to go up. Or 50 Cent out there saying, I don't want to, I'm going to, my taxes are going to go up if Biden wins. There is an argument, and this crosses racial lines. There are a lot of working class folks out there who think, who buy the hype of Donald Trump being the job creator. They accept that argument that he made. This was the greatest economy. This was the greatest economy until the pandemic struck. That was not true then, but there are a lot of folks that accept that, and that, I think, may speak to why he did better in working class places like in Florida and in Texas, and so forth.
And that's the thing that people in politics have been aware of for a long time. There's a reason that people on the left talk about millionaires' taxes instead of $500,000 taxes, because $500,000 a year to the poorest people seems like a plausible amount of money that you could make one day. And polling has found that when you say, even though like most of the plans involve taxing people at that income. But polling has found that when you say explicitly you're going to do that, people are like, ooh, no, I could make that someday. But if you say millionaires tax, they're like, yeah, sure, they could pay. Scott, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, and I think this goes to something about polling. I think nobody understands America anymore. But I think a lot of this has to do with Donald Trump is an absolutely unique character, for good or bad. I don't think he's capable of reproducible results. So the fact that the same percentage of African Americans vote for Donald Trump, even though he's probably the most racist president or second most racist president ever, even though evangelical Christians vote for Donald Trump, even though he demonstrably has affairs with porn stars, there's just people will vote for Donald Trump because there's something so peculiar about him and unique about him. And I think because he was a brand before he showed up as a candidate, people would vote for a bag of Doritos because it's like, I know Doritos, I like them, I've had that.
Look, I like Doritos as much as I like Joe Biden. That's for damn sure. Which, and I think about it, but exactly as it, and he's such a unique character. Like, I will admit, a couple times when he was campaigning, and I think he did this in one of the debates, he does a shtick where he makes fun of, like, what if I were a normal president? And then he does this whole thing. He was like, we love the troops, blah, blah, and like does it in a boring voice. And I laughed out loud at it. It was a funny bit because he was saying something. And I was like, in that moment, I was like, okay, now I get Donald Trump, because like he was like kind of like saying something that I think most Americans feel. It's like, we do know that on some level, even the most decent politician is just doing an act. And I found that very funny. Like he Google it, like he'll do a thing, like he turns around and then he comes back and like walks in a weird walk. He's like, I love America. And I'm like, dude, that's a real funny John Kerry he's doing there. I got to give him that. But the fact that he does exactly that point, like that's a unique thing that we don't see in politics. Nobody has said like, this is a load of bullshit. Now, the problem is, of course, he, is evil. Like, that's the problem, and has been. And the other thing that's interesting to me, like we talk about why didn't he see as much Republican attrition? When you look at what he did policy-wise, a lot of it is in line with what mainstream Republicans wanted. Like that tax cut and the judges are in line with mainstream Republicans want. And I'd say also, though, at the same time, part of why he lost, there were like those persuadable Trump voters were people who were like, I want to see him take on the swamp. And, they're like, he didn't. he embraced the swamp, as much as he could. I think, we're running down on time here. I just want to talk about one last thing. And it's not important, but it's really funny to me, which is to say on Saturday, Donald Trump, again, still currently the president, had his legal team get ready to hold a press conference in Philadelphia, and he tweeted out that it would be at the Four Seasons. Then he quickly corrected it with a quote tweet saying Four Seasons Landscaping. Then he deleted the tweet entirely and reposted it with big press conference, 11 a.m. at Four Seasons Landscaping. Now, Four Seasons Landscaping, as it turns out, is a landscaping company in part of Philly. I'm not exactly sure what neighborhood, but it is a much more industrial neighborhood. It's right next to Fantasy Island, an adult video and material store, shall we say. The good people at the Four Seasons Hotel chain openly posted a tweet saying that he would not be doing his legal team would not be doing a press conference there. Now, this may change by the time this airs, but our reporter following this story, Caroline Brennan, my sister, confirmed the rumors were true. Someone on his team thought that they were booking the Four Seasons, and in fact, by accident, booked Four Seasons Landscaping.
Well, can I just make one important?
It has been verified that they went to Four Seasons Landscaping by accident. Scott, go ahead.
The way you tell a story could suggest that the Trump people who set up conference locations don't have class, but in fact, the operation is called Four Seasons Total Landscaping. Not just Four Seasons Landscaping.
Total landscaping.
If you're a Trump, you go for total landscaping.
That's right. The guy knows his landscaper.
He knows his landscaping.
I think
By the time, but
sorry, Medina.
go ahead, Medina.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I think my favorite part is the landscaping folks agreeing to this. Like, I'm imagining getting this call. You're just like a dude working at a landscaping place, minding his own business. Yeah. And then you get a call from like the president's people, and he's like, we want to host a press conference in front of your business, and being like, yeah, okay.
I was gonna say, particularly it's
What
a
was the
Saturday.
thought process? What made it be like, yeah, sure, that's totally fine and normal.
I want the story to come out. It's a Saturday during a pandemic. I'll bet landscaping business has been uneven this year. I want so badly to them to come out and be like, of course. And as you know, our average fee for hosting a press conference is $400,000 that we will need up front in cash. And they were like, you got it, no problem. They're like, awesome. Guys,
Of
we're good for the
course.
next 6 months.
Of course, by the time by the time the whole story comes out, we may learn that it was Four Seasons total manscaping, and who knows? Maybe he figures he can, I don't know, shave off a little bit off of Joe Biden's lead. Did I know that?
Hey. Oh, yeah. They're not going to let you stay at Bloomberg if you keep doing those tabloid puns. You have to class it up a little bit, Robert. Timmery, thoughts on the big get by Four Seasons Total Landscaping today?
I mean, it's just so very on brand that they would just not organize this well, because I mean, like, so my home state is Nebraska, where he famously put 7 of his own people in the hospital because they didn't figure out a way to get supporters from the Eppley airfield back to their cars after a rally. So for hours in the cold, a bunch of old people were like just trudging along the side of the road because they had not done the basic kind of like events planning that I have to do for a burlesque show. Like I have to figure out how to get people in and out of the building. And that's just like baseline. That's like baseline planning. So it's just so perfectly on brand for them.
Yeah, I think anyone on this panel who's done improv shows knows, if nothing else, you need to promise people that they can leave at the end, like no matter what, or else they're not coming.
As sadly, and this is going to sound, and I don't want this to sound like a joke because it will end up sounding like a joke. One of the things we've learned particularly over the last few weeks, heading to election day, is that going to Donald Trump rallies is hazardous to your health. There was a study that came out just a couple of days before election day. It was a Stanford study, so I mean, it had some professionalism behind it that suggested that possibly as many as 700 coronavirus deaths could be attributable to people who may not have actually gone to the rally, but may have been in contact with people who did go to the rally. And we learned both in Nebraska, and I think also there was a similar episode in Florida where people who went to rallies ended up getting stranded and not having a bus ride out of there. And so, I mean, it is one of the reasons why this president is so frustrating and makes people angry is that even his most loyal, the people who are most loyal to him, he is not loyal to at all, and he doesn't care about their health. He cares about their adoration, and it's frustrating. And we still have 2.5 months before he leaves the office. He leaves the White House, and those could be the 2.5 of the most unnerving months that we have yet to face, that we have yet to deal with.
Well, good. I was feeling good today, so you did work at that, Robert.
Oh,
I'm back
well, I do want to say
right back to where I normally should be. So thank you.
One more little thing.
Sure.
Scott showed us his the adoring drawing that his daughter made about what Donald Trump looks like. My friend, and actually the friend of the show and has been a guest on the show, Carol Markowitz, who lives in Brooklyn. She like a number of us in New York and in Philadelphia, we had people outside of our apartments, yelling and screaming and applauding when the news came that Biden had been declared president-elect. So Carol tweeted earlier today, "My 7-year-old thought the cheering in Brooklyn was that they found a cure for the coronavirus." To which I responded, "They did."
Well done. Oh, all right, good. You ended on a bright note. With that, I think we will end this conversation. Wonderful conversation. Thank you so much, panel. Before we head out, Scott Benjamin, where can folks find you on the social medias if they want to?
So I am on Facebook. That's pretty much the one I use, which is what old people are supposed to use. So you could look up my name, Scott Benjamin, on Facebook, and there I am.
And also look for Quarantine Comics on there as well. Madiva, I know I said it at the top, but anywhere else folks can follow you on social media, see your work, that kind of thing. I know I said it, but I need
Oops, there we go. I mean, yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at AUDRE LAWDA Mercy. That's Audrey Lotta Mercy. And thank you. And you know, my writing is available elsewhere on the internet. You can just search for my name.
Great. Timmery, where can the folks at home find you online?
Probably the easiest is to go to sexwithtimmery.com, TIMAREE. And you can connect with me on Twitter, TIMAREE_LEIGH, Timmery Lee. And you can find all sorts of stuff there, including how you can listen to DTF. And I'm representing my co-producer, co-star,
Friend of this show.
in front of the show, Daryl Charles. His album Black Gentrifier out now. So
it's one of the best albums you'll ever hear. Check it out. And of course, Robert, where can the folks find you online? What should they be looking for?
You can definitely find me on the Twitters at Rob George. You'll find puns and political commentary and just odd entry into this kind of weird brain up here, and also Bloomberg Opinion. There will be a column or two of mine coming up in the next week or so. So check that out as well.
Excellent, thank you. And folks can find me on Twitter at Brennanator, on Instagram at BrennanatorGraham. Thank you so much, panel, for being with us. And quick thank yous, as always, to Declan Shalvey and Jordy Belair for creating the Electoral Dysfunction Eagle right there behind my head. Thank you to Joanne Harris for making our theme song. Thank you to Kevin Scott for our show animation. And thank you to Ned Thorne for helping me put these together every single week. Now, to play us out, as we discussed, not just the Republicans or the Democrats are going to have to live with Trump supporters for all time, or at least for the next few years, but many of us on the left who have them as family members are certainly going to have to live with them and perhaps Zoom with them this coming Thanksgiving. I want to kick it over to our friend Killy Dwyer with a beautiful song about the Trump supporters in our lives. Ned Thorne, star wipe us to Killy.
Phew, it's been a rough 4 years, am I right, guys? But I just want to take a minute and talk about my dad. My daddy is my hero, he's kind and smart and fun. He coached my little league, great at dad joke puns. He drove me to dance class, we talk about our lives. Without his guidance, I wouldn't have survived. I grew up and moved out, he was always there, just a phone call away to show me that he cared. He was my teacher, my role model and friend. He always came through, on him I could depend. Raised money for good causes, was always there for his friends. Gave good advice to his colleagues without excuses, always made amends. I keep singing verses, I just don't want to hit the chorus. I don't want to sing it, it'll be too hard for us. I guess I'll just say it instead. My dad voted for Trump, 2016. A lifelong Republican, but said, hey, let's try this drain the swamp thing with this Apprentice reality TV star guy, right? So I just held out and I prayed things would change. The first time around, I thought he'd regret and turn effing Fox off the TV set. He'd see all the damage, the 4 years of hell, the scandals, hypocrisy, lies, gaffes, and well, it's a hard no. Yeah, he didn't see that. I tried, I pleaded, I argued, I begged, I utilized facts. He just mailed in his ballot for Trump. A little bit ironic, but, least my mom isn't voting for Don. A big relief I sigh. But to be fair and morbidly honest, she's not voting because she died. One less vote for Trump.